A very good morning to all of you. Of course, as always, I tell my audience that I'm very delighted to come to a place like Concern. In fact, this is my first visit, and already I'm finding it a very interesting visit. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I think it'll be appropriate for me at the outset to thank, in particular, Dr. Wacharas, who kindly invited me to participate in this forum. In fact, he's a very good friend of mine, and we have participated together in many conferences, workshops. And I also deem it a great privilege and honor to address such a distinguished gathering of what we call development practitioners, stakeholders, and senior officials of development organizations. I'm sure they are present here as well. And you know, I'm very confident that given the kind of topical discussions that you're going to have the whole day today, we'll certainly come out with some good, relevant initiatives that will further create closer relations and stronger cooperation, not only within the broader ASEAN regional grouping in general, but also the greater Mekong sub-region in particular. Now, it's also appropriate, of course, Dr. Narong Chai is one person that I respect a lot. I forgot to mention this. He's a very prominent personality in Thailand and who has contributed quite a lot, significantly I must say, to the development of ASEAN as a regional grouping. And his contributions are still required, as you would have gathered from the speech that he just gave you a few minutes ago. Now, I think it's appropriate for me to give you an overview of where we are as far as the ASEAN regional grouping is concerned. This is important because the greater Mekong GMS region is an important component of this broader regional grouping. Ladies and gentlemen, ASEAN region has made good progress in economic integration in terms of trade and economic activities. It has become, in fact, all the economies in the region have become more resilient after the 1997 financial crisis and continue to exhibit good growth and development despite the global economic slowdown. The region has in fact become even more interconnected as a result of the numerous trade and investment initiatives that we have put in place within the ASEAN grouping. With a market of over 600 million people and a combined GDP of almost US dollars 1 trillion. I'm sorry, 3 trillion. 3 trillion, that's the figure. The region is vibrant and growing. Collectively, as a group, ASEAN is the 6th largest economy in the world after the US, China, Germany, Japan, and the UK. It is projected to rank as the 4th largest economy in the world by the year 2050. Or it could even be earlier. I think it could even be earlier. Some ASEAN countries are now posting growth rates exceeding 6% despite the subdued global economic environment. The average GDP per capita in all the economies of ASEAN has increased steadily over the years. This reflects the numerous collective efforts that ASEAN countries have put together to get their economies going forward. It is not, the ASEAN region is now the 4th largest labor market in the world. A strong middle class of more than 100 million has emerged and is growing, making ASEAN a very lucrative consumer market for the international business community. Now you probably want to know what has made ASEAN economies to grow. There are a number of factors. Of course, I will try to highlight some of the major ones later. But I think it's important for me to give you an idea of where we are in statistical terms, in terms of trade and FDI inflows. FDI inflows have increased significantly over the years. In 2015, it totaled US dollars 120 billion. The share of intra-ASEAN investments also continued to expand. The average share of intra-ASEAN FDI was 17.4% during the period 2010 to 2015. All ASEAN member countries have also emerged as important trading nations and are making significant contributions to the global economy. Global trade, ASEAN's total trade in 2015 amounted to about US dollars 230 billion in 2015. Now, the reasons why we are doing well in the ASEAN region can be attributed to the following factors. Largely owing to economic cooperation and integration, ASEAN remains one of the most dynamic economic growth centers in the world, contributing significantly to the regional and global economy. The positive developments in ASEAN has taken place as a result of the joint efforts of all ASEAN member countries for self-improvement, and also through their open and cooperative policy, and also as a result of concrete efforts to broaden, or we would say widen, and deepen economic integration in the region. The important thing to remember is the collective efforts of all ASEAN member countries. I think Dr. Narongchai will agree with me that as a group we have performed quite well. Despite our differences, we have come together on some very important common objectives. Now, having said that, now this is the most, there are indeed challenges facing the region amidst, no, I think before that, I think it's important for me to say a little bit more also on ASEAN as a whole. I forgot to mention the creation of a very important mechanism in 2015. A good example is the creation of the ASEAN Economic Community, or we call it the AEC in short, in 2015. Due to the efforts of all parties, this mechanism has continued or helped to maintain the good momentum in broadening and deepening regional integration. In fact, the AEC mechanism is now acknowledged and recognized as the most progressive and promising regional cooperation mechanism in Asia today. Now I have to say something about the GMS, which, as I mentioned, is a very component of ASEAN. Now, within the context of ASEAN regionalism, the GMS, which was set up in the early 90s, Datuk Ronchai, right, constitutes an important component and contributor to the regional integration process. The GMS program remains highly relevant today, and as an established platform for member countries to cooperate on a range of issues, including exploring complementarities and synergies within the ASEAN region and beyond. It is encouraging to note that with the support of regional financial institutions and donor countries, the GMS program has helped implementation of high priority projects in transport, energy, environment, human resource development, tourism, trade, private sector investments, and agriculture. And Dr. Narongchai also alluded to the work that's being done in the context of trade and facilitation as a result of the growing trade relations among the GMS countries and the rest of the world. Increasingly, the modernization and industrialization process is emerging from a process of transition and transformation. It is clearly evident the GMS economies are shifting from a traditionally shifting, say, from a subsistence economy to more diversified economies, and which is premised on more open and market-based system. Now, having said that, I'd like to highlight some of the important challenges that are facing the region as a result of the rapidly changing global economic environment. There are risks to growth stemming from the global environment in the form of declining growth of global economy, international trade, rising protectionism, geopolitical tension and rivalry, as well as uncertainties facing the UK and EU as they face the Brexit negotiations. There are also downside risks associated with commodity and oil price volatility, financial market volatility, and rising debt levels in the general markets, among others. These are indeed very serious challenges facing our region today. The performance of international trade has been very disappointing in recent years. Since 2008, global trade growth has declined from 6% per annum to about 2.5% per annum currently. Further, global trade growth has lagged behind global GDP growth. In the past, global trade growth has always exceeded substantially from global GDP growth rate. But today, we are seeing a reverse, and that speaks a lot for itself. Statistics indicate that trade intensity is also declining. And we are also seeing, against the backdrop which is declining international trade, we are seeing trade protectionism. We are witnessing trade protectionism, which is on the rise. around the world, and especially in the developed countries, which are important markets for our countries in the region. The protectionism, the trade protectionism in particular, seem to have increased as a result of the backlash against globalization and liberalization, pushing the global economy into prolonged contraction. Countries are now increasingly adopting inward and protectionist policies. The demand for import protection to create employment is on the rise. The stockpile, according to the World Trade Report, the stockpile of restrictive measures have increased. And given the current political dynamics, further protectionist measures cannot be discounted. I think I will remiss if I do not highlight some of the developments in the US in particular. Dr. Narongchai has alluded in some ways to what is happening in the United States of America today. But I will just focus essentially on the trade side. You know, the US administration's inward-looking and protectionist policies are creating a great deal of anxiety and concern among all countries, and especially in ASEAN. The various pronouncements on possible US trade policies convey a clear message that the US administration was prepared to abandon the country's long-standing approach to trade and instead pursue mercantilist and national interests arbitrarily, completely disregarding international norms and rules as set out by multilateral institutions such as the WTO, the World Trade Organization. For example, it has been indicated that the US administration could unilaterally impose tariffs against countries that it thinks have unfair trade policies and punish companies that relocate overseas and sell products to the US market. This is what President Donald Trump highlighted during his campaigns. And this is what he's trying to implement by way of trade policies. The US administration has also signaled that it is prepared to work outside the WTO and impose very high tariffs by invoking its own national trade laws to resolve trade disputes. These actions could violate WTO rules and invite retaliatory actions from other countries. The administrative decision to intervene in arbitrary and unpredictable ways outside WTO could create chain reactions with countries taking retaliatory actions to penalize US manufacturers. This could usher in an era of economic protectionism worldwide. Further, it could trigger a global trade war that could disrupt international business and growth. In a multilateral context, it would adversely impact the smooth functioning of the multilateral system and that the US has built, in fact, over the past decades. So it is somewhat of great concern that if this policy is pursued by the present US administration, then it's going to put the multilateral trading system in great jeopardy. It will affect the smooth functioning of the multilateral trading system. The administration's raft of protectionist measures, as well as its flirtation with protectionism and nationalism, would negatively impact ASEAN's trade and investment, and ASEAN's trade and investment interests. The US demand for manufactured products have been the key to ASEAN economic resilience in supporting employment and consumption. The prospects of protectionism could affect the demand for ASEAN manufactured products. Today, the US accounts for a significant share of ASEAN's trade and source of foreign direct investments. That's the pessimistic picture that I'm now portraying to all of you. However, we must think beyond the current challenges. And I believe there are also reasons to be optimistic about the prospects of the ASEAN region expanding its growth and increasing in particular its trade and investment. The ASEAN, of course, for us to continue to be where we are, would require us to do much more in order to make our ASEAN economy resilient and robust. In this respect, ASEAN should build on its past achievements and continue to move forward. Existing mechanisms such as the AEC and other cooperation frameworks, including the GMS cooperative programs that have been in place, must be given a larger role to play for a win-win solution in ASEAN and the broader Asian region, and even beyond on a global basis. During the past decade, the success of ASEAN countries has demonstrated how both the developed as well as the less developed members of the grouping can progress and bring about greater prosperity for their people. They have not only increased their per capita income, but have significantly also reduced the incidence of poverty in their countries. It appears the progress achieved has been largely underpinned by the industrializing drive, as well as strong trade and export-led growth strategy. And not to mention, of course, the business-friendly policies and the liberalization initiatives that we have pursued within the grouping in order to form an economic community. These have been the major factors that can be attributed to the success of ASEAN economies. But ASEAN must not, I must repeat, must not gloat over its successes and be lulled into a sense of complacency. That will be very, very dangerous. ASEAN must recognize, no, I must say that the business as usual approach, I don't know whether you'll agree with me, ASEAN cannot continue to adopt the business as usual approach because the world situation has changed, the dynamics has changed. So this will require ASEAN to to relook at its policies and strategies, both at the national and regional level, to sustain the growth trajectory. This is important to ensure that ASEAN economies are more resilient and robust in order to remain competitive and to attract investments. Increased regional cooperation and integration must still be seen as a key strategy, as this will bring multiple benefits to the countries in the region. So what should be ASEAN's core focus in the light of these developments? I believe ASEAN's core focus must remain in designing and implementing clear regionally based strategy in a transparent, inclusive manner to promote open and fair trade and boost trade relations and cooperation with its trading partners bilaterally, regionally, and multilaterally. Efforts must be intensified at both national and regional level to accelerate regional integration within the context of AEC with a view to uplift the region's production capacity and competitiveness so as to enable them to have better market access to overseas markets for their goods and services. And I think the withdrawal, I think Dr. Rangcha, you mentioned about the TPP. I'm not so worried about US withdrawal from the TPP. In fact, US withdrawal provides a wonderful opportunity for ASEAN to conclude the RCEP negotiations successfully. RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. This is an ASEAN initiative to have a region-wide agreement with 6 of its dialogue partners: Japan, Korea, China, India, Australia, New Zealand. 6 countries. So altogether, 16 countries. And that's going to constitute a very big platform for ASEAN in particular to expand its trade and investments. So I see it as an opportunity. Although some people say, oh my God, US withdrawing from TPP, what's going to happen? At the Rancha, you mentioned that people were talking about it in the meeting in Hanoi, as you said. I don't see much, I don't feel very concerned. I think we should use it. It's a wake-up call. Use it as an opportunity to move forward regionally, within ASEAN, Asia, and even beyond. Hopefully, in years to come, I hope the Chinese initiative of forming an Asia-Pacific Free Trade Agreement will become a reality. That's even be better. I'm confident that if ASEAN is guided by grounded principles of openness, transparency, economic integration, and mutual trade and investment flows, it can weather, it can overcome the uncertainties that we are going to face in the future. In fact, these principles that I outlined are the means to sustain growth, reduction of poverty, and improved standard of living. Now, coming to GMS, I have the following observations to make. The concentration of intra-regional trade among the more developed countries in the ASEAN region suggests the need for better integration of lower-income countries in the GMS. The supply-side constraints, as well as the low industrial skills capabilities of the lower-income countries, have prevented them. They may have increased it, but still have prevented them from participating in the rapid expansion of intra-industry and production sharing arrangements in the region. Given the rich human and natural resources in the GMS region. It has the potential, the GMS region has the potential to be the new frontier of ASEAN economic growth. The GMS provides a comprehensive range of trade and investment opportunities across the entire value chain, from pure assembly operations, right to higher value-added product development. From operations based on low-cost labor up to one based on technology and capital intensiveness. Increased cooperation among countries in GMS region and beyond will allow countries to complement each other by specializing in particular fields, sector, or segment. In the region, proactive policies are required Now, these proactive measures are necessary to enhance the synergetic linkages and collaborative programs and projects to promote supply capabilities and competitiveness of sectors with growth potential. I think in this context, I believe the advanced economies of Asia I'm talking about, and beyond, must be actively engaged to assist the GMS economies to move up the value chain via the transfer of technology, skills, and knowledge. All these will help industries and businesses to be more creative in their work, to innovate and restructure in order to address the growing competition and deal with other challenges. Now, before I conclude, I just want to highlight some specific areas where GMS could focus on. And I believe it should be not only focus on where, I know there are already some programs, but there's a need to further enhance and strengthen cooperation, especially in the following areas. Industrial collaboration through division of labor by building supply-side capability for low-income countries, which is the GMS countries. This is because the countries concerned have common production and exports structure. They have little prospects for regional trade expansion, but the potential is there if we get this right. Need to establish a facility for providing adjustment assistance to lower income countries for building supply capacity as well as training and skills development. I believe it's also important to enhance cooperation in technological research and development. There is also, I believe, a need to enhance financial cooperation to reduce the risk arising from interdependence and vulnerability to external factors. And lastly, I believe, and Dr. Rangchai has alluded to this, the importance of strengthening infrastructure and communication links. Because this, I believe, must be accorded top priority for programs in the GMS, because that is going to bring about a great deal of development dimension. Because when infrastructure improves along the line, there will be opportunities for trade and investment. Finally, in conclusion, I wish to state that it is almost an undeniable fact that greater ASEAN regional trade and sub-regional cooperation and openness offers considerable benefits, both in terms of enhancing national competitiveness as well as in unlocking the tremendous potential in the region. Such cooperation will also result in more balanced development in the ASEAN region as capital opportunities are shared and spread throughout the region. We therefore need to foster a greater sense of community in the region, a community that has shared interests in economic integration as well as regional stability and security. The future prosperity relies on sustaining the momentum. Now is not the time to recoil back into the path of isolation and protection. On the contrary, now is the time for all of us to resist extreme nationalism and trade protectionism and move rapidly forward towards greater integration and openness. I thank you all for your attention.